When most people hear the word social security, they immediately think about a monthly check arriving in their bank account. But I've always believed that's too narrow a way of looking at it. Social Security is much more than a retirement program. It is a mirror reflecting the financial health of the United States, the changing demographics of the country, and the government's ability to balance promises made decades ago with the economic realities of today. Whenever new rules or administrative changes are introduced, especially those affecting millions of retirees, it's worth paying attention not because every update signals a crisis, but because every change tells us something about where the system is heading. The July updates have generated a great deal of discussion, particularly among Americans born in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. Rather than reacting emotionally to headlines, it's far more useful to understand what these changes mean in the broader context of the economy and why they matter over the long term. One of the principles I've followed throughout my career is that systems evolve under pressure, whether we're talking about financial markets, governments, businesses, or retirement programs. The same pattern appears repeatedly throughout history. When a system faces rising costs, increasing demand, and limited resources, adjustments become inevitable. The Social Security system is no exception. Today, America has a much older population than it did several decades ago. People are living longer, healthcare costs continue to rise, and fewer workers are supporting a growing number of retirees. These demographic shifts create financial pressure that policymakers cannot ignore forever. So, when you hear about new procedures, updated verification methods, or changes in administration, they are often part of a much larger effort to keep the system functioning in a world that looks very different from the one in which Social Security was originally designed. For those born in the 1940s, many are already retired and rely heavily on Social Security to pay for everyday necessities. For those born in the 1950s, retirement is either underway or approaching rapidly. Americans born during the 1960s still have time to make important financial decisions, but they are now close enough to retirement that every policy discussion becomes increasingly relevant. Although these three generations are in different stages of life, they all share one common concern. They want confidence that the benefits they earned through decades of work will continue to provide financial stability during retirement. That concern is understandable because retirement planning depends on predictability. When uncertainty increases, anxiety naturally follows. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that government programs remain unchanged forever. History teaches us exactly the opposite. Every major economic institution evolves over time. Tax systems change, banking regulations change, healthcare policies change, retirement systems change. The question is rarely whether change will occur. The real question is whether individuals prepare for those changes before they happen. Successful investors don't wait until a crisis appears on television before they begin thinking. They prepare years in advance because they understand that long-term planning creates resilience against uncertainty. Another important factor driving these July updates is technology. We now live in a world where digital fraud has become one of the fastest-growing financial crimes. Criminal organizations are becoming increasingly sophisticated in targeting retirees because they know many seniors depend heavily on predictable monthly income. Identity theft, phishing emails, fake government phone calls, and fraudulent websites have become common threats. As a result, stronger identity verification and additional account security measures are becoming necessary. While these procedures may sometimes feel inconvenient, they represent an effort to protect beneficiaries from much larger financial risks. Throughout history, every advancement in technology has required stronger systems of protection, and Social Security is adapting to that same reality. Another principle that I've often discussed is that incentives drive behavior. When financial stress increases across society, fraud tends to increase as well. Economic pressure encourages bad actors to search for vulnerable targets. Retirees often become those targets because scammers understand that many seniors are less familiar with rapidly changing technology. That's why protecting your Social Security account is no longer simply a matter of convenience. It has become part of protecting your overall financial future. Something as simple as regularly reviewing your account information or enabling stronger security measures can significantly reduce unnecessary risk. It's also important to separate administrative updates from structural problems. Every year, headlines appear suggesting that Social Security is about to collapse or disappear. Those headlines attract attention because fear spreads quickly, but reality is usually much more complicated. Administrative changes, updated verification requirements, or new service procedures do not automatically mean benefits are being reduced. At the same time, ignoring long-term financial challenges would also be a mistake. The truth usually exists somewhere between panic and complacency. That's why careful analysis is more valuable than emotional reactions. When we step back and examine the broader economy, we see several powerful forces working simultaneously. Inflation has increased the cost of living for many retirees. Housing expenses remain elevated in many parts of the country. Healthcare continues becoming more expensive. Government debt has reached historically high levels. These trends don't necessarily produce immediate changes to Social Security benefits, but they influence the environment in which future policy decisions will be made. Understanding these larger forces helps explain why governments continue reviewing and adjusting administrative systems over time. One lesson repeated throughout economic history is that governments, facing financial pressure generally, try to improve efficiency before making more significant structural changes. That's why updates involving technology, customer service, fraud prevention, and administrative procedures often appear before larger policy debates emerge. These improvements are designed to reduce waste, improve security, and ensure benefits reach the correct recipients without unnecessary delays. While they may seem minor individually, collectively, they reflect a broader effort to modernize a system serving tens of millions of Americans. Many retirees understandably focus on the size of their monthly payment, but equally important is ensuring those payments continue arriving safely and reliably. Financial planning isn't just about maximizing income. It's also about minimizing avoidable risks, reviewing your banking information, protecting personal data, monitoring official correspondence, and staying informed about legitimate policy updates are all examples of risk management. Throughout investing, the biggest losses often occur not because people failed to earn higher returns, but because they ignored preventable risks that eventually became expensive mistakes. Perhaps the most important takeaway from these July discussions is that financial security depends on preparation rather than prediction. None of us can perfectly forecast every future policy decision. We cannot control inflation, demographic trends, political debates, or economic cycles. What we can control is our own preparedness. We can stay informed, verify information through reliable sources, protect our financial accounts, review our retirement plans regularly, and avoid making emotional decisions based on sensational headlines. Those habits create resilience regardless of how economic conditions evolve, and history consistently shows that resilient individuals navigate periods of uncertainty far more successfully than those who react only after problems become impossible to ignore. The reality is that retirement has changed dramatically over the last several decades. A generation ago, many Americans expected a combination of pensions and Social Security to provide enough income for a comfortable retirement. Today, that picture looks very different. Traditional pensions have become far less common. Healthcare costs continue to climb faster than many retirees expected, and inflation has steadily reduced the purchasing power of every dollar. That means Social Security has become an even more important source of income than policymakers originally imagined. When a system carries greater responsibility than it was designed for, every administrative improvement becomes more significant because millions of families depend on it. The July updates should be viewed through that broader lens. They are not simply about paperwork or technology. They reflect the reality that protecting the integrity of the system has become increasingly important as more Americans rely on it. One pattern repeats itself throughout history. Countries that experience rising debt eventually face difficult choices. They can increase taxes, reduce spending, stimulate economic growth, borrow even more money, or attempt some combination of all four. None of those choices are painless, and each creates winners and losers. This doesn't mean retirees should expect immediate cuts or dramatic changes tomorrow morning. It simply means that understanding the broader economic environment allows you to think ahead rather than react after decisions have already been made. Good financial planning has never been about predicting the future with certainty. It's about preparing for multiple possible outcomes so that unexpected events don't completely disrupt your life. This is also why diversification matters. One of the principles I've discussed for decades is that depending on a single source of income creates unnecessary vulnerability. Social Security provides an important foundation, but financial resilience becomes stronger when retirement includes personal savings, investment income, emergency reserves, and careful budgeting. Many retirees, unfortunately, discover that relying entirely on one income stream leaves little flexibility when inflation accelerates or unexpected medical expenses arise. While not everyone has the same financial resources, everyone can benefit from regularly reviewing their spending habits and understanding where unnecessary risks exist. Another issue often overlooked is the psychological side of financial decision-making. Fear spreads much faster than facts. Every time a headline mentions Social Security, millions of people immediately assume something negative is about to happen. That emotional response is understandable because retirement income represents security, but history repeatedly shows that making financial decisions based on fear rarely produces good outcomes. Successful investors train themselves to separate emotion from analysis before believing alarming claims circulating online. It's always worth asking simple questions. Where did this information come from? Is it supported by official sources? Is someone trying to create fear simply to attract attention? Those habits of critical thinking become increasingly valuable in today's digital world. Technology itself is changing retirement in ways many people never anticipated. 20 years ago, most interactions with government agencies happened through mail, letters, or local offices. Today, secure online accounts have become central to managing benefits, updating personal information, reviewing earnings histories, and protecting financial records. That transition creates tremendous convenience, but it also requires greater awareness. Cybersecurity is no longer a concern limited to banks or large corporations. Every retiree now plays a role in protecting personal information. Strong passwords, account monitoring, and skepticism toward unexpected phone calls or emails have become essential financial habits. There is another long-term trend worth considering. America is experiencing one of the largest demographic transitions in its history. The baby boomer generation continues moving through retirement, increasing the number of beneficiaries, while the growth of the working-age population slows. This demographic reality influences every discussion surrounding Social Security, Medicare, and government spending. Demographics move slowly, but once these trends begin, They often continue for decades. Investors spend enormous amounts of time studying demographic changes because they influence everything from economic growth to housing, markets, and healthcare demand. Retirement programs are no exception. When people ask whether Social Security will still exist in the future, I think they're often asking the wrong question. The more useful question is how the system will continue evolving to adapt to changing economic conditions. History shows that governments rarely leave major institutions completely unchanged over long periods of time. Instead, they gradually adjust them as circumstances evolve. Sometimes those adjustments involve administrative improvements. Sometimes they involve eligibility rules, funding mechanisms, or long-term financial planning. Understanding that gradual process helps reduce unnecessary fear while encouraging thoughtful preparation. One of the greatest advantages any individual can have is financial literacy. It doesn't require predicting stock markets or understanding every detail of government policy. It simply means understanding how your own financial life fits within the larger economic system. Know where your income comes from. Know your monthly expenses. Understand your healthcare costs. Review your retirement plans regularly. Keep important documents organized. Protect your personal information. These simple habits often have a greater impact on long-term financial security than constantly worrying about every headline appearing in the news. The July updates also serve as a reminder that retirement planning doesn't end once benefits begin. Financial circumstances continue changing throughout retirement. Inflation changes purchasing power. Healthcare needs evolve. Family situations change. Investment markets experience cycles. Government policies continue developing. The most successful retirees are usually those who remain engaged with their finances instead of assuming everything will remain exactly the same year after year. Staying informed is not about living in fear. It's about maintaining control over the factors you can influence while accepting that broader economic conditions will always continue changing. As we look ahead, one thing remains remarkably consistent throughout history. Economic systems reward preparation. Individuals who understand long-term trends, avoid emotional decision-making, diversify where possible, and remain informed are generally better positioned to navigate uncertainty than those who ignore warning signs until problems become unavoidable. The July Social Security updates should therefore be viewed not as a reason for panic, but as an opportunity to become more informed, more organized, and more prepared. Ultimately, Social Security represents a promise made across generations, but every promise exists within the reality of economic conditions. The strength of any retirement plan comes not from assuming nothing will ever change, but from building enough flexibility to adapt when change inevitably arrives. Whether you were born in the 1940s, 1950s, or 1960s, the lesson remains the same. Stay informed, protect your financial information, review your retirement strategy regularly, think beyond today's headlines, and focus instead on the long-term forces shaping the economy. History teaches us that those who prepare before change becomes obvious are almost always in a stronger position than those who wait until circumstances force them to react. And in retirement, as in investing, resilience is often the greatest asset of all.